All right, guys, welcome to this week's episode of the Inner Shift Podcast. Today, Jesse and I are going to talk about doing things by yourself. And I don't mean the X rated things by yourself, I just mean like things by yourself. So that's how we're starting this episode.
Whoa. That's not how I expected this intro to go, but I'm with it. I agree. That's not what it's about.
No. So we'll segue into this episode then. So some comedic value for the listeners here and for the viewers. You're welcome. So we are talking about doing things alone because I think a lot of people have trouble going and doing things by themselves. And a prime example of this is tonight I'm going to a concert by myself. And
Ooh, what concert?
Rain Wolf, which is like a rock. It's gonna be like a rock concert. Yeah.
Okay. Better
the
question.
Starlight
Why did you not invite me?
I was very impromptu. I booked it today.
I was just bugging you, buddy.
I was like, how do I turn off my camera here? I think my mom's calling me. Yeah, 1 second. Hey, Mom. Yeah. No, I gotta go. No, it was very impromptu. I booked it today, and I was like, you know what? I have never gone to a concert by myself. I always saw people that like went to stuff by themselves as kind of weird. But now that I've gotten older, I have realized that it's cool as fuck. And
it's a very hard thing to do.
yeah, and for me too, like I'm also like, I'd say that now that you and I know each other fairly well, I'm fairly extroverted once I get to know you, once I'm comfortable with you, and if I'm in like a comfortable environment. But I would say that I am to some degree quite introverted. So for me to go to a concert alone is definitely outside of my comfort zone because I don't know anybody likely.
For sure. No, and that's been one of my New Year's resolutions was actually to get more comfortable with being alone and just like kind of getting out of my shell. And part of my whole health journey was wanting to become more of an extrovert, wanting to go and do things like that in a way where I'm comfortable just trying to meet new people and interact with people and whatnot.
Yeah.
I just booked my first solo vacation for next month. Not even really a vacation; it's 4 days. But just like the act of getting on a plane, checking into a hotel, going out for dinner, all that sort of stuff, doing that all alone is like somewhat intimidating.
Yeah. 100%.
Despite how normal it is for a lot of people, especially people that have spent their lives with a partner. Like I was with my partner for the last 11 years of my life, so I never really did things alone. And
Yeah.
now that I am and trying to push myself into doing things alone, it's kind of scary. It like you don't have that social buffer, right? Like that person to kind of make you feel safe in those situations. And then
No,
on top
legit.
of that, because you're alone, you're almost inviting other people to talk to you, and or you have no excuse not to try to talk to other people yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is kind of an interesting topic because, like, I myself am going to Texas in March alone too. So, like, I've never gone anywhere like internationally, like by myself. It's for like a week, and it's kind of very like a similar
Why
thing too, right? Like,
Texas?
there's going to be a keynote there, so I'm seeing a speaker for 3 days,
Okay.
and then I figured I might as well extend the stay for another 4 days, and I figured let's go alone because I'd say like,
Get some of that barbecue.
yeah, that's what I've heard. um But I'd say like to bounce off what you were saying there too. Like oftentimes, if I go to events, I tend to uh, maybe unintentionally let the other person that's with me initiate the conversation, and then I kind of just
Yeah.
like gently say I would just kind of segue into it, right? And then all of a sudden, like the ice is broken. I don't have to be like, how much does a polar bear weigh? Yeah. And then they just start talking to you, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, like all of a sudden I'm in a comfortable conversation, but um like you, I'm trying to do more things this year that are outside of my comfort zone. I'm doing things by myself. I'm challenging myself to be okay in my own presence more, and that I can have fun being by myself at something, right? Not that I'm going to be alone at this concert, but I can have fun going to this concert with no one else and still have a good time, right?
You're alone, you're just not alone. There's other people there, but you are still alone, and that in and of itself is intimidating. But it also opens the door to meeting new people and to new experiences and kind of getting out of your comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
Um, last month I started getting on this whole wanting to be okay thing, a being alone thing, and that started with baby steps. And for me, the first thing was going to a movie alone. And I was always weird about going to movies alone. I hated it. I've never gone to a movie alone in my life. So it's an afternoon during Christmas break, and I decide, you know what, I'm gonna go to a movie alone. I look at the movie listings, and I decide, okay, I'm gonna go to Moana 2. Nothing
Great
wrong with
movie.
that. Moana 2, I loved Moana 1. I was super excited. I'm like, hell yeah, let's go. So I go to Moana 2. I go to a day show because it's the middle of the day. We have the day off. Why not? Um, and I get there and I kind of realize I'm a dude in his 30s alone in a theater full of children. And I quickly realized that was not a great movie choice for me to go to alone for my first movie.
What is this? What is this podcast episode right now? First, I make a solo male endeavor experience in the beginning, and you're talking about being in a Disney
I, it
movie
was
theater
it
with a
was
bunch of
it
kids
was
by yourself.
very awkward. I'm just saying, like, it's probably in my head that it was very awkward. I'm sure like parents are judging. Some parents probably did judge me, but I'm like, I'm sitting in that theater and I'm kind of realizing how freaking weird this is, and I'm just
Oh,
like,
dude.
okay, just focus on the movie, bud. By the way, Moana 2, great movie, good plot, but the music of it was very big letdown because Moana 1, the
I
music
would
was
agree.
fantastic.
I would agree. No, but first things first, though, man. Everybody loves a Disney King, so you know what? Don't hold
There you
that
go.
back.
There you go. That's true. Anytime you meet a girl and you mention that you like Disney, they're like, "Hell yeah!"
When is it ever a miss?
Exactly. I
Hey,
love
chat, tell
Disney.
me that. Chat, tell me
It's
that. When's
true.
it ever a miss?
Disney and Pixar is all amazing. Um. Yeah. And yeah. Ever since I've been working on trying to do things alone. I go for dinner alone. I try to go at least once a week. Even just to get more comfortable having um that alone time, that I almost use it as like my self-reflection time and just
Yeah,
time to
that's legit.
chill and feel good and treat myself, I suppose. um and I don't have to. One of the nice things is because I'm so focused on my nutrition right now, if I go out for dinner alone, I don't get that peer pressure of like, hey, do you want to get an appetizer? Oh, do you want to split some wings or whatever, right? Like, I can get what I want. I don't have to feel any sort of judgment about ordering the grilled chicken with broccoli as my side. Like, there are stigmas that people will be like, bro, you're coming to a restaurant, that's what you're getting. Like, let me eat my food.
This
Leave me
is
alone.
this is fair. Yeah, it's so interesting, the idea of being so connected in today's society, but also being so alone in lots of ways. And
Uh, Honestly, being like a social media personality, that is a very real thing, because I'm alone so frequently. I almost feel like I'm alone all the time. But it's weird because I'm spammed with DMs, spammed with comments. I'm constantly being reached out to. Literally
yeah,
100% of the time, if I look at my DMs, there's a new DM. I am constantly being reached out to and being people trying to start conversations with me, whatever. And I have hundreds of ongoing conversations with people, but I still feel alone all the time, despite all of that.
so it's an interesting topic about just how, like, again, and like, just the year that we're in with the media platforms that we all have access to with technology and everything too. we can all feel so connected. We can see what we're all doing every day if we all share about it or if we talk about it. But again, we could still feel so alone or so uncomfortable with the idea of being by ourselves, which is interesting. And I think, to make this podcast episode actually worth listening to, um, I think it's really good.
Whoa. First of all, it was worth listening to the second we did the intro, all right?
Okay,
And then my
so
great movie theater story, come on.
right, this is the most real podcast episode we've had. Um, to give some value, I'll put it that way. To give some value, I do think being okay with being by yourself is truly something that needs to be worked on. And a lot of people oftentimes don't even realize it. Like, it was myself included too. It's like, when you're by yourself, what's the first thing that you tend to do? Or if you are by yourself, do you avoid being present? Do you avoid being with your thoughts? Do you avoid any of those things? And if so, the only way to really get more comfortable with being with your thoughts and being alone is just by being alone more frequently. And it's kind of in a sense where it's like almost like date yourself, right? Take yourself out for dinner, take yourself out to something, and be okay with being like table for one, or be okay with being like just one ticket for the movie, Moana 2, or just like, going to a concert by yourself. Who you here with? No one. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, but like, it's okay. Like, it's good to normalize that and having fun in your own presence. You don't have to have somebody there to have it be fun, a fun experience for you, or to feel comfortable being there. I think everybody should just be okay with the idea of being alone, or like, at least working towards that.
For sure. I think it's also a great way to work on your mental health, to kind of give yourself that time, like you said, to kind of acknowledge that if you're spending too much of your alone time kind of consuming media or TV or whatever, and not really allowing yourself to be alone with your thoughts and your opinions, and giving yourself a chance to reflect on who you are, where you're at, all those things, you're almost doing yourself a disservice, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
one of the things I try to always work on with my clients is, you know, one thing that most people that are overweight struggle with is emotional eating. Almost every single person that's overweight emotional eats. And for me, the best way to get past that is to allow yourself to feel your feelings. And it's very hard to allow yourself that time, to give yourself the ability to just sit with your feelings and acknowledge how they make you feel, acknowledge, you know, the fact that they exist even, and just allow yourself time to process them. If you don't process them in some sort of healthy manner, rather than watching TV or, doom
Yeah.
scrolling on Instagram or whatever it may be, if you're doing those things and ignoring your feelings, that's when you're going to start eating food to
Yeah.
cope with those feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, those, if you are finding that you are doom scrolling, or if you are trying to watch TV shows or play video games, you're trying to disassociate, you're trying to distract your mind, you're trying to pull yourself out of the present because you're trying to avoid the feelings. And like Jesse mentioned, I think it's really important to feel your feelings and process them fully, because it becomes a problem when you're in constant denial. And I
Absolutely.
was I was reading this book recently, and I'm still reading it right now. And he made a good comment in it where he was saying, like, if we, when you're wanting to process something, it's great to say it to somebody. After you felt it, right? It's great to say it to somebody or to write it down. Otherwise, you're going to carry it in your mind or in your body. And this is very true because, when it comes to feelings and emotions, feelings are just feelings. We attach emotion to it, but feelings are
Hmm.
are just feelings. But it is important to, again, understand that you are able to feel the said feelings and you have to feel them to work through them. But after, it is also okay to let go of them.
Hmm.
And I think it's important to let go of them, by writing them down, writing down how you're feeling in a journal or in your phone or whatever it may be, or speaking to somebody, talking about it, getting it out there. And you'd be surprised by how good you feel once you're able to process something, work through it, and actually like let go or begin to let go versus continuously trying to hold on to it and not processing it or shoveling it down and trying to distract your mind constantly.
Yeah, I would say the thing is a lot of people don't even realize that they're doing that, right? Like I know for me when I was going through my depressive episode of I call it an episode, it was over a decade. When I was struggling with depression, struggling with anxiety, I didn't even realize I was depressed. I didn't because I spent literally 24 hours a day either eating or playing video games. Like I would consume to ensure that I didn't feel. I just lost myself. And that's that's a lot of people. And
Yeah, yeah,
you may not even realize that that's what you're doing in any given moment. But if you're someone who finds yourself doom scrolling all the time, or you find yourself watching TV constantly, like we're talking, 5 hours a day or whatever it may be, like if you're spending all of your available time doing these things rather than spending time with yourself or spending time with friends and family, or any activity that's actually productive in some way, um that's when you really have to do some self-reflection and question whether or not you are avoiding things. And there's a very, very real possibility that you are,
yeah,
and that if you don't process those things, you're never going to get to a point where you're not. And for some people, that's okay. Some people want to spend their life watching TV.
yeah,
And if that's you, you do you. But if you want more, if you want to, live your best life, then you have to be able to process feelings. You have to be able to get past those things because they will eat you alive.
yeah. And like, uh, you hear it oftentimes too. People will say like, "Oh, I have tons of time alone. I watch TV, I play video games, I do whatever," and like, I don't think people realize fully that it's a form of escapism. Like when
Hmm.
you're watching TV shows, you're watching movies, you're really drawn into a video game. Like you're not present. You're not, with your mind currently. And don't get me wrong, I think I'm not trying to say that it's not okay to watch a TV show sometimes and watch a movie sometimes. I
Oh,
think
it's
that's
it's
perfectly
totally
fine.
healthy to do those things in moderation.
But if you catch yourself like going through some personal stuff and your first initial response is to turn on the TV, or your first initial response is to turn on a video game, or if that's where you immediately go to process, air quote, or to just feel better, that's not really a proper coping mechanism. It's just allowing you to prolong what you need to be feeling to a later point in time where, newsflash, you will feel it, just worse.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Um, and I think that it ties in a lot with health and nutrition in general, in the sense that, like I mentioned earlier, like if you're not doing those things, that's 100% going to lead to emotional eating,
Oh
because
yeah.
you start seeking out dopamine as a way of ignoring those things. And when you don't have, TV or video games or whatever to escape to, then you start seeking out dopamine rushes, because those also just help your brain forget what other things it's dealing with.
Yeah, I was listening to this podcast the other day. It was Connor Beaton, and he's a psychologist, and he was talking about how a lot of people will actually use um he was talking about how a lot of people will generally use coping mechanisms as a form of avoidance.
Hmm.
Um, and it was interesting because the way that he spoke about it is he talked about people lacking impulse control. So he talked about, maybe it is self pleasure, or maybe it has to do with food or whatever it may be. People are often so quick to lack the impulse because they are so badly seeking a way to avoid the current state of being and their current state of mind. And it's crazy because we live in a society where like a lot of these things are so easily accessible, right? Like we just want to feel better and we find a way that we can. Um, and it's all very artificial.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy how much of our world is artificial at this point, though, to be fair.
Well, yeah, a lot of it is not real anymore. It's like, how do you even define what real is anymore?
Yep. Like going back to the conversation I mentioned earlier, like I have all those conversations and I still feel alone. Like they're not artificial. Those are real people, but it feels artificial. And that's true for, like, yes, that happens on a much larger scale when you're a quote unquote influencer. God, I hate that word. But everybody experiences that to some degree, right? Like,
Yeah.
even like coworkers at work, like nobody, like, sure, a lot of people get along with their coworkers or hang out with them outside of work or whatever, but a lot of times those are just artificial quote unquote friendships where you feel like you're connected to somebody, but as soon as you leave work, that connection's gone. And
Yeah.
like so many things in today's society, as far as our emotions, are artificial.
Yeah. I this isn't too much of a segue, but um a while back I asked myself a question, and this is like after I was going through a bunch of stuff last year. Last year was kind of a big year for me, and I had a point where I kind of felt like I was at a bit of a rock bottom point, and I asked myself the question, if tomorrow came and I was robbed of my personal training certificate, for whatever reason, something happened and I couldn't be a coach anymore, what would be left of me?
Oof.
A- And
That's an interesting way
uh,
to look at it.
and I at the time I couldn't give myself an answer. Like I thought about it and I was like, um, I don't really know. And on this journey that I've been on of trying to, you know, choose peace, not find peace, and that's something that I've realized. I've been able to get more clarity on that. When I ask myself that now, I'm actually able to give myself many answers. But at that time, I wasn't able to. The, the first thought in mind at that time was, I don't know who I am, right? I don't really, and it made me kind of question like what I'm doing with my time apart from coaching. And again, it's definitely a fine line of who you are versus what you do, because what you do is not who you are. But people often identify with what they do, and I think it's a question that people need to ask themselves. Like, well, if you were just stripped of your job tomorrow, or if you were stripped of your social media platform, what would be left, right? And it's like it's so crazy because we identify so heavily with what we do. It becomes a big part of who we are, that it identifies us. And I think it's important to understand like who you are behind the scenes, and like what makes you unique, what makes you special, what things you value, what things you prioritize, and what things you want to do. Like, and that made me realize that I wanted to learn guitar. It made me realize that I want to do more things by myself. That made me realize that I like reading. I like, you know, all of those things. And I'm thankful, I don't think I would have been able to find those things if I hadn't been brutally honest with myself and been like, who am I, if I was robbed of this tomorrow?
I think that's a really interesting way to think about it, because I've certainly never questioned who I am without my career, and in most points of my life, it would have, I mean, I would have just drowned myself in video games. And now that I'm in a much healthier place, I have a pretty good idea of who I am as a person. And I have a much, I've consciously sought out that time alone, specifically because I want to figure out who I am better, and I
Yeah.
want to, um, a lot of my health journey for me has been about trying to experience things that I haven't experienced before. And being 500 plus pounds, I didn't get to live a lot of my 20s, as I'm sure you can imagine. And going through the process of acknowledging that I want to try new things, and I want to I want to be that adventurous and spontaneous type of person, I realized that I have not done a lot of things because it is so easy for me to find a new experience. And I imagine that's not specific to people, like that's not because I was 500 pounds. That was because all I did was play video games, right? Like so much
Mhm.
of this I could have done when I was 500 pounds. But because all I did was stay home and play video games, because I didn't take the time to go out on my own and try and be alone and do these things and find new experiences and enjoy life, I didn't I didn't go out and try these experiences, and thus I didn't have as much fulfillment in my life as I do now. And
Yeah, yeah,
I as much as I like to say that I lost that time because I was overweight, I also lost a lot of that time because I chose to stay home and follow those escapisms. I chose to stay home and avoid trying new things and to avoid being alone and trying things. And
yeah,
it it's humbling to recognize how much I didn't do. I
yeah.
tried sushi for the first time last month. Like, I'm 35 years old. Like that's a very easy thing to just check off a list, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
but I didn't because I didn't care. I didn't care about myself and I didn't care about trying new things. I didn't care about experiences. All I cared about was where my next escape was coming from and how fast I could get it, because I just didn't want to exist. And I think a lot of people feel that way. A lot of people rely on TV and video games and doom scrolling and internet shopping and whatever else. Like, everybody relies on things for some form of escapism. And it, like we said earlier, it's totally normal and acceptable to do that for an hour to a day if you're, just trying to unwind or whatever. That's a very
yeah,
different thing than spending all of your free time doing these things as a way to not process your feelings.
yeah. It's honestly kind of crazy how we are all such creatures of habit that we so easily get into a routine of complacency. We get into this routine, we get comfortable with how things are. It's not even that we like how things are, it's just that we become used to it. It's safe, it's predictable. And the idea of doing something that's a little bit outside of our comfort zone is terrifying, right? We can't predict what's going to happen, how late we're going to be out till. We can't predict, if we're going to come home that night to finish that mission on that video game that we wanted to do, and it's just like it's a lot of things that um in hindsight it's kind of wild. But the same thing for me, like I would oftentimes be that person where I would say yes to something and then last second be like, I don't really want to go. And I would find like every excuse to justify not wanting to go. Oh well, I had a long day today. Oh well, I have a long day tomorrow. And I've probably sacrificed or given up a lot of cool experiences and a lot of great things just simply because I chose to say no. I chose to stay home. So I can say I'm on a similar path as you, where I'm just trying to follow through on stuff more and follow through on my word. If I say I'm going to do something, if I'm going to go somewhere, I'm going to go, you know?
I think
And
that's a social anxiety thing where we kind of just, like, I know I struggled really badly with social anxiety, and you would you almost look for an excuse to get out of anything that you've agreed to do. You agree to do literally anything, and it'll be like, oh man, but it's kind of raining and I don't have winter tires on. It's the summer, bro. Yeah, but the rain, it's not great on the road, like you just look for the most ridiculous excuse because you will take literally anything to not go and do that thing.
yeah, yeah, no. And you're just like, oh, I should probably watch the pilot of that one TV show I've been wanting to watch. It's been in my to watch list for a while, and I don't know when else I'm going to watch it, so I probably
The
should.
dog
And it's
blinked 5 times in quick succession, like He could be getting sick. Like, I just don't want to leave him right now.
Yeah, it's funny how we justify it and we find every reason to reinforce the reasons as to why we should stay home and not partake in it. But it's interesting how I can confidently say my life has been different since I've been saying yes more. And
100%.
I've been actually doing these things. Like, again, just saying like, yeah, this could be fun. Actually, this could be a good idea. Then going. Or even the guitar, it was very spontaneous, right? Like I was like one day I was like, hey, I was thinking about a hobby, and then all of a sudden I was like, well, I've thought about guitar. I've wanted to in the past. I tried before, I didn't really like it, but you know what? Why not? And then I went and I bought one. And I was like, well, I have a guitar now. Okay.
Hey
I
man,
set a
I
schedule to
played bass for a
practice.
long
It's like,
time. We can just hang out and jam now. There you go.
did you?
Yeah, I don't own one. I would have to go and buy a new one. But I played bass
Oh,
for many years. Yeah.
well, there's another reason we can have a jam sesh. No,
we
man,
got we'll write a new podcast intro.
The music for the podcast intro will just be us playing. All right, man.
this
This is
time
a
this
fun
time
one.
not playing alone.
It's true. It's true.
And that, my friends, is what we call a callback.
And on that note, this podcast episode is done. Thank you guys for tuning into this one. We hope that you enjoyed. Moral of the story, go out there, do some new things, meet some people, make some connections. Even if you feel like, you're a little bit intimidated to go, you feel like it's out of your comfort zone, but you feel like you should do it, go and do it. You'd be surprised how you feel after, how empowered you feel, how your life will be different. And just believe in yourself, you can do it.
Yeah, there is science behind pushing yourself to do things that you don't want to do is going to improve your mental health. And that's kind of tenfold with this, right? Because not only that, you're going to build connections, you're going to feel good about yourself. Like, absolutely. Get out there, do the thing. You'll feel good.
And maybe it'll be less solo playing too, so.
All right, have a good night.
We're gonna end it there.